Welcome to Average Joe's Pool. If you're in the market for a low-cost carbon fiber pool cue, then without question you have already heard of this brand. Today we're going to be looking at one of their flagship cues. This is the Retro from Rhino. So the three retro cues that I have in front of me have been kindly supplied to us for review direct from Rhino. So first of all, who are Rhino? Well, Rhino are actually a Vietnamese manufacturer, been making quite a lot of waves in the pool cue industry recently, thanks in part to their low-cost carbon fiber shafts and pool cue options. Now you might be wondering, well, where precisely are Rhino cues made? Well, you may have already guessed, being a Vietnamese company, yes, they are indeed all made in Vietnam. Now, as you can see, we actually have three of these cues in front of us, and there's a very good reason for that. The Rhino Retro actually comes in a choice of 5 different imitation wood finishes. And we have 3 of those finishes here from top to bottom. We have Cocobolo, Pale Moon Ebony, and Bacote. And within those 5 variations of wood finishes, each one of those comes with a further 3 options. And what we have here actually represents precisely what those options are. The first cue that we have here at the bottom, as you can see, is completely wrapless. And then the next option up from that price-wise is what we have in the middle here. This comes with an imitation crocodile leather wrap, actually made from microfiber, complete with printed silver rings. And then the next option up from that, which is actually the top of the line option, precisely what we have on this top cue here. This one comes again with that microfiber imitation leather. This time it's imitating lizard skin. And we have the printed rings again, but also we have these printed points as well. And remember that all 3 of these options are available on all 5 of those different wood finishes. And when it comes to weight, the Retro is the same as all of the other current Rhino cues. These come between 18.7 and 19.5 as standard, and then if you want to add additional weights, you have to buy the optional weight bolt set or individual weight bolts. And when it comes down to warranty, Rhino cues offer a limited lifetime warranty on their products. And if you want more details on that, please be sure to take a look at the Rhino website. So next let's talk price. Now we do have 3 very distinct options here. And as you can appreciate, we have 3 separate prices. So first of all, for the most basic model with the wrapless handle, they come in at $319. And then for the intermediate model with the crocodile style wrap, you're talking $369. And last of all, if you want to go top of the pops with all the bells and whistles, you're talking $399. Now if you're interested in buying yourself a Rhino cue, we will be adding Amazon links into the video description for you. So if this video turns out to be helpful for you, then please help to support what we do here at Average Joe's Pool. Please be sure to click those Amazon links. So that just about covers all of the basics. But if you're anything like me, you'll probably want to delve in a little bit deeper, find out a little bit more. Let's take a look.
Is he the one you want in the jump seat next to you when you're 35 million miles away from home?
When it comes to packaging, the Rhino Retros come supplied in a full colour retail box. And that box comes completely shrink wrapped, and when you open that up, you'll find that the cue also comes in a poly bag. And additionally, you'll also find that the cue is supplied with a pair of free joint protectors. So the first impressions that you get from the Retro are certainly very strong, and the quality of the packaging that we have here puts many other manufacturers to shame. Obviously, we do have 3 pool cues here, and we're only going to be actually testing one of them, and we're going to be testing the top one here, which is the Cocobolo finish, and this is the top of the range model at $399. However, we will also be showing you some of the features that are on some of the lesser models as well, just in case you're interested in those, and of course those finishes too. And so throughout this video, the clips that you're going to see are going to be mainly of our top cue here. Now, a big feature of the Retro series is the fact that they do come with these very distinctive wood type designs. However, it is very important to point out that the butts on these cues are not actually made from wood at all. these are a man-made material. This is carbon composite, and so all of the wood finishes that we have on these cues are actually printed designs. Now, the wood effect that we have on the cue that we're going to be testing today, this is the Coco Bolo option. And as mentioned earlier in the video, the Retro series does actually have 5 different finishes to choose from. And being the top of the range model, we have these printed rings and also these printed points on our Coco Bolo model. And for this top of the range model, the wrap that we have here, it is imitation leather. It's made from microfiber, and it's meant to imitate lizard skin. And do remember that there's an additional option available for the wraps for the model down from this, and that is an imitation crocodile leather. And additionally, both the medium and top tier models do come with these printed rings. And there are a couple of main differences between the medium and top models. You'll also find on the top of the range model you have a black section between the 2 lower rings. And perhaps the biggest visual difference is when you get to the top line model, you do also have these printed points. And for the joint, this comes as standard with a 3/8 by 8 pin. Now when it comes to logos, we do actually have 3 on these cues. We have one at the base of the carbon fiber shaft. And then additionally, we have another small Rhino logo right here at the end of the butt plate. And then additionally, you also find another Rhino logo hidden away on the end of the rubber bumper. So we've talked enough about the butt. Now, one of the big features, and something you're definitely going to want to know about when it comes to these Rhino cues, is going to be the carbon fiber shaft. And when it comes to the shaft, what we have here is a full pro taper profile. Now, it's not the most extreme pro taper in the world. You can see the angle comes down to around this point before it starts to flatten off. Often on the most extreme ones I come into about this point here, so it's a little bit more weight in this area here, but you have plenty of room for the bridge up front. And then moving our way up the cue, for the ferrule here we do have a small white ferrule and measures just 3mm in length. And then in front of that we do have a clear pad. And then of course we've got our tip on the front of that. And talking about tips, what we have on this cue, this is the brand new Time crystal tip from Rhino. And Rhino actually used to supply their cues complete with leather tips. However, this is their latest development. This is the Time crystals made from 10 layers of microfiber. And this is one of their hot new products, and they're putting a lot of time and investment into marketing this tip. And the tip that's fitted onto these cues is a number 3, which is medium as standard. And when it comes to tip diameter for the Retro, there is only one choice available, and that is 12.5mm. I measured this in super close, 12.55mm. Now when it comes to the length of these cues, one quite important feature is the fact that these actually come with a 30-inch shaft as standard rather than the more usual 29 inches. That's definitely good news for taller players. Now the entire cue actually measured in at 59 3/16 inches, including the tip and the rubber bumper. However, if we take away from that both the tip and the rubber bumper, what we're left with comes in at 58 5/8 inches. And our overall length comprised firstly of a butt length of 29 1/4 inches, plus a shaft length of 29 15/16 inches. And when it comes to diameters, our diameter measured at the butt 32.19mm, and the diameter measured at the shaft 21.64mm. So when it comes to weight, remember we do have some allowable variance that comes as standard. These are meant to weigh between 18.7 and 19.5. And when we weighed ours in, this came in at 18.71 ounces. And our overall weight comprised of a butt weight of 14.855 ounces, plus a shaft weight of 3.855 ounces. And as we always do in our reviews, we did remove the rubber bumper from the end and had a look on the inside of the cue. And on this particular cue, there was no weight bolt fitted into the rear, but do remember if you want to increase the standard weight, that the weight bolts and also a weight bolt kit are available from Rhino separately. And we also checked the cue for its centre of balance, and that came in at 19 5/16 inches, measured from the rear of the cue, including the butt cap, which places the centre of balance a fair way in front of the wrap. So now we're completely familiar with the Retro range, so it's time to take our Coco Bolo model and start the testing. Test number 1, straightness. So let's take a look at straightness. And we run a basic visual inspection and additionally 3 straightness tests. The first of which is the old-fashioned table roll test. And our retro Cocobolo looks simply perfect during the table roll, with no obvious signs of straightness issues. But this test is a very easy one, so let's turn up the heat for our second test, the rail roll test. And for this test we need to watch the tip for wobble whilst rolling the cue along the solid rail of the table. And here we can very clearly see that we do have some wobble present at the tip, which is clearly nodding away as the cue is rolled. So let's look at this further with our toughest test, as this cue moves over to the ball bearing cue rollers. And now we can see the wobble more clearly. And we definitely do have a slight straightness issue with this cue. Now the level of wobble that we're seeing here is far from outrageous, and we should remember that this is a budget cue within its category. But on the flip side of that, we really should be seeing a little bit better here, remembering that this is a cue made from entirely man-made materials, which will be super resistant to warping. So overall the result is not terrible, but we are seeing more wobble than is ideal or expected, giving the Retro a disappointing and extremely average 2.5 stars out of 5 for straightness.
The filthiest beer, the deadliest beer. It's Styx beer.
Coming up in just a few moments we have our play testing, but first let's take a look at deflection with the squirt test. And this test is run over a distance of 75 inches, which on a 9-foot table is the gap between the head spot and the rear rail. And for this test we use maximum parallel English coupled with a hard shot. And this test is repeated for at least 10 times on both sides to ensure an accurate overall average. And the Retro managed a quite amazing average of 1 5/8 inches, which is way over average and an outstanding result. Additionally, it's worth noting that the result is identical to the result that we achieved on Rhino's Nebula 2. However, we did experience much better consistency on the Retro during testing. So the results are looking super positive for the Retro. But all of this means nothing if the cue doesn't actually play well. Speaking of which, so the technical tests are done and dusted. So now we're going to move on to the fun stuff, get this on the table and start playing with it. And here at Average Joe's Pool, we always ensure that all products that we review have a minimum of 5 full hours of use on the table before we formulate an opinion, just to make sure we can give it a fair and accurate review. So now it's time to kick it back and check out the Retro. What do you say? Let's play. So now I've had some time playing around with the Rhino Retro. I'm glad to report that overall the experience of playing with this cue has been first rate. One key factor when it comes to these Rhino cues is the simple fact that they have a very decent and not too hard feel to them. They're quite responsive and give good levels of feedback. And most importantly, they don't feel too stiff and they certainly don't feel pingy. And so as far as carbon fibre shafted cues go, these are definitely towards the softer side overall. And there are probably two likely factors that contribute towards that. First perhaps being the tip, and secondly also perhaps the fact that we have this carbon composite butt. And it must be said that I didn't actually notice any negatives when it came to playing with this carbon composite butt. And of course, although it is completely different to wood, if this is a factor that actually helps to slightly soften the overall feel of the cue when it comes to carbon fibre shafted cues, then perhaps this is a good thing. So overall what we have here is a great cue to play with and also very consistent through a wide range of shots. And another element on this cue that I appreciated is the microfiber wrap. Now obviously what we have here is trying to mimic a genuine leather wrap, but this is not leather, this is made from microfiber. And I really appreciated the overall feel that you get from this grip. It is slightly different in the hand to leather, but it does have quite a waxy and very grippy feel to it. So overall the wrap is excellent. Now it's worth pointing out that we recently did a review of the Rhino Nebula 2. And although the Nebula 2 was also an excellent cue to play with, I did have some minor issues with some consistency on some shots. And it's especially noticeable when you're pushing the cue to extremes, when you're likely to get that miscue. What I found on the Nebula 2 is when you miscue that shot, you don't get the traditional ping noise that you'd normally expect. However, instead of that, you get a feeling that comes from the cue that feels like a miscue, but you don't get that sound. And so you're not actually 100% sure whether that shot miscued or not. However, when you took a look at the cue ball, it was very, very apparent that it was indeed a miscue. You get that very compacted little chalk spot on the cue ball, really hard to get off. I was looking forward to seeing if we were going to have any differences between the previously reviewed Nebula 2 and what we have here with the Retro. Because technically those two cues really should be identical. Underneath that paint job we have exactly the same specification. And I'm glad to report that the experience of playing on the Retro was actually much better than the Nebula 2, even though technically they are the same cue. And in my opinion this is most likely to be down to the simple fact of the tip. Now both of these cues are fitted with the new time crystal tip from Rhino, but the behaviour between the two cues was definitely distinctly different. That does bring me to one of the minor issues that I did find with the Retro, and that is the simple fact that when it comes down to chalk retention on the tip, it's particularly poor, and so you're going to end up with quite a dirty cue ball that's going to need cleaning fairly often. And additionally I did find that I was getting those little compacted areas of chalk even without miscues sometimes, and that they were doing it far more often than you would expect. And a couple of things to quickly point out. When we're testing all of our cues, we always ensure we use the same chalk so we get a nice even playing field. And what we use is blue Master Chalk. And of course, Master Chalk is by far from being the cleanest chalk in the world. So if you are using one of the newer super clean chalks, then perhaps your experience will be a little bit different. And so I think that what I've experienced with the differences between these two cues is probably going to come down to variations in the tip. Now it must be pointed out that that is only a guess, and I only have played with two cues that have these tips on them, but the behaviour was distinctly different between the two, and technically the cues otherwise should be exactly the same. And the only other difference between the Nebula 2 that we tested and our Coco Bolo Retro is the fact that we did have a slightly different diameter of shaft. On the Nebula 2 it was a 12.75mm, on the Retro here, the one that we tested, had a 12.5. However, I feel that's far less likely to be the cause of the issue than perhaps the tips. And speaking of these new time crystal tips, there is another slight niggle that I have with these, and that's going to come down to the colour, because at the end of the day what we have here is a blue tip And if you're using blue chalk, it's actually very hard to see how much thickness you have on that chalk when you're visually inspecting the tip. Because of course normally when you're chalking your tip, if they're more traditional leather colour, you can visually look at it and you can see where the thinner patches are. You almost get that kind of camouflage pattern to it, so you can ensure you get a nice good even layer of chalk. But of course when that tip is blue coupled with blue chalk, makes it very hard to see the thinner patches. It almost camouflages itself, so getting that nice even layer is a little bit more difficult. Now of course if you're not using blue chalk, then that completely eliminates the issue, but blue is the most popular colour for pool chalk, so a lot of people watching this video will be wanting to use blue. So setting aside just for a second that slightly quirky tip, overall what we have here has been a fantastic cue to play with. What we have here is a fantastic playing cue, has an excellent feel to it, not too hard, not too pingy, very responsive in its feel. And the cue really does feel very nice in the hand. As I mentioned before, I really appreciated this microfiber grip with that slightly waxy feel to it, and also the carbon fiber shaft that we have here really is silky smooth. So taking all that into account, let's go ahead and give it its score for performance. I found the Rhino Retro to be a pleasure to play with. It had a great feel to the hit, with nothing feeling too stiff or hollow. The only real issue we experienced was with the poor chalk retention on the tip, and that's using master chalk, and that resulted in an extremely dirty cue ball. But if you're using a much cleaner chalk, then this could easily be avoided. Otherwise, an excellent experience, and scoring the Retro a very strong 4 stars out of 5 for performance.
I rebuilt my own mind.
When it comes down to features, it's really hard to imagine the Rhino Retro being any more well featured. Literally everything on this cue is a feature in itself. So starting at the end of the cue, first of all, of course, we have that time crystal tip, and this is a feature in itself, quite unusual in the fact that it's made from 10 layers of microfiber. And then behind that we have that very distinctive clear pad, and then behind that we have that very short ferrule for that very sporty look. And then we come down, of course, into the biggest feature of this cue, the carbon fiber shaft. But those features don't end there. Coming down to our butt, the main feature of the butt, of course, is the simple fact that it's made from carbon composite rather than the more traditional wood. And then we have these retro inspired wood type prints. And then additionally, to help finish the cue off, we also have these imitation leather microfiber wraps. It's worth pointing out that the decorative rings that we have on these cues, remember they're not actually rings themselves, they are just part of the print. When you look beyond the actual cue itself, of course, got to remember it does come in that full colour retail box, and it is supplied complete with a pair of the joint protectors. So as I say, literally everything on this cue really is a feature in itself, and some of the features that we have here are quite unusual and a little bit unique. Now before we go ahead and score our Retro for features, there's an additional special feature that we're going to take a quick look at. Now it's not included with this cue, it is an optional extra, and so it's not included as part of the review itself, but if you are looking at possibly buying one of these, it's something that you'll probably want to be considering. Take a quick look at the extensions. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is actually these optional extensions that Rhino offer specifically for the Retro cues. Now remember, these are available separately, they're not included, and the price on these is $69. So they're perhaps not the cheapest extensions in the world, but they're also far from being the most expensive. What's particularly cool about them, like I say, is that they do come in matching finishes for the entirety of the Retro collection. So rather than having to go for the more traditional plain black, you get these perfectly matched extensions for the cue that you're looking at. Now these extensions only come in one length option, and that is 8 inches as standard. And one thing that's definitely worth pointing out with these extensions is when you look at them on the Rhino website, they look exactly like this, and it's a little bit confusing for people that aren't used to extensions as to how this actually works. Because when you look at this on the website, you see it has this thick plastic thread, and it's quite obvious that that's going to screw into the bottom of the cue. But of course, to attach this, what you're going to have to do is first of all unscrew your cap here, and that takes some time, and then you're going to screw it in, and then when you're finished, unscrew that again and put that back in. Thankfully that's not the case at all, but it does look a little bit like that when you first look at it on the Rhino website. When you look in more detail at this, actually this section that we have here does unscrew, and this is a replacement bumper complete with the hole in the center, and we actually have the pin in the center of the extension. So the way this works is you've got this replacement bumper that has the hole in the center, and so you remove your old bumper, set that to one side, you're not going to need that anymore, and instead you're going to fit this brand new one that has the hole installed. And that's going to be a permanent replacement. Once that's installed, it doesn't need to be removed again. Then when we need to install that extension, all we do is simply put it on the end, a few twists, tighten them up, and that is fitted, good to go. And likewise, when you finish with it, undo it, set it to one side. Remember, this bumper with the hole in it just stays on as your replacement bumper. So as you can see, a very functional and also very handy piece of kit to have. As I mentioned before, I think the best thing about these is the simple fact that they do come in these perfectly matching colours. So once you've chosen your cue, if you're going to get an extension, you can have an extension that matches your cue, which is pretty cool. So remember, if you are interested in picking up one of these extensions, they are available separately. They do not come with the cue, and the current pricing on these is $69. And of course, because they don't actually come with the cue, they're not going to form part of this review. But if you're interested in buying one of these cues, there's a high likelihood you're going to want to know about these, and now you do. So extension aside, let's go ahead and score the Retro for features. So when it comes down to the simple factor of features, the Retro is almost literally overspilling with them. And some of these features are both quite innovative and also quite bold choices by Rhino, who it would appear are prepared to stand strong behind their products. And so if it's features that you're after, then the Rhino literally has them in spades, scoring the Retro a perfect 5 stars out of 5 for features.
There better not be any doubt about your shot this time. One shot.
Now when it comes down to the factor of quality, this is definitely one of Rhino's strongest points. From the very first moment you set your eyes on that full colour retail box, remove that shrink wrap, and even notice it's got a little thumb groove to help you open that box up. Everything about it is screaming quality. And that attention to detail is immediately apparent upon opening that box and getting your eyes on the cue itself. And firstly, concentrating on the carbon fibre shaft, the feel of that shaft is absolutely fantastic. It really is silky, silky smooth. And the quality of the fit and finish on that shaft really is immaculate. Just look at how well finished the tip is from the factory, complete with that little clear pad behind it, and that ferrule. Everything is absolutely flawless. And working our way down the cue, even coming on to the logo that we have there, this is actually engraved, the Rhino logo just here. Again, perfect. And I especially appreciated the quality of the finish that we have around the joint insert. On some of these cheaper carbon fibre cues, sometimes when the insert is placed on the inside of that carbon fibre, it's glued into place, and sometimes you do get very, very small little traces of glue around the edges. You literally can't spot a single fault with this at all. And as for the profile that we have here, it is a full pro taper profile. It's not the most extreme, it does come down quite a long way before it actually evens out around this area, so carrying a little bit more weight around here than some of the more extreme pro tapers, but still an excellent profile with plenty of space for the bridge. And then working your way down the cue, we have the print quality. And overall, the actual quality of the print is super sharp and looks really, really good. And then moving down to the wrap, the finish that we have on it again is perfect. The quality of it is excellent. It is a textured wrap, and so we have a kind of pattern that's built into it. Remember, this is not genuine leather, this is a microfiber leather. Has an excellent feel, very grippy, with a slight waxiness to it. And of course that embossed pattern is slightly raised, and that helps again to generate additional grip. And remember that there are 2 options when it comes to the grips on these. On the mid-range model, this actually comes without these printed points, but it does come with a kind of an imitation crocodile style leather, whereas on the top of the range model it's an imitation lizard style leather. And the main differences between these 2 wraps is the fact that the crocodile style one that we have here is a little bit more raised. It does feel a little bit chunkier in the hand, whereas the lizard one does have overall a slightly smoother feel. So overall the quality on these wraps is excellent, and you do have to look quite carefully to actually be able to spot where the seam is as they form it around and you get that little join. It is there, but you do have to look quite carefully for it. Quality wise, excellent. So there's absolutely zero question when you take a look over these cues that quality is something that Rhino take extremely seriously. So are they absolutely 100% perfect? Well, they're not far off, but I did find a couple of small issues. First comes down to more personal preference more than anything, and that is the fact that the bumpers that we have on the end here, they're not actually made from rubber at all, they're actually made from quite a hard plastic. And so when you put that cue down on the floor, it does have quite a knock to it, a very, very solid feel. And when it comes to the actual hardness of these bumpers, this is definitely one of the hardest that I've come across. But of course we should remember that that has zero effect on performance. That's more down to personal preference. And the other thing that I'd like to point out is actually cosmetic as well, and that comes down to the prints that we have on these cues. So as I mentioned before, the actual quality of the prints is excellent. But what's slightly unusual with these prints is they appear to be done entirely in metallic paints. They do have quite a distinctly unique look to them. And whilst of course these designs are trying to mimic real woods, with these metallic type paints, it doesn't really pull it off as being particularly authentically wood looking. And how realistic these look does depend a little bit on which of the wood finishes you go for. Now by far the most realistic that we have here is the Cocoa Bolo that we've been testing, and that's perhaps because it is slightly darker. And by far the least realistic looking would be the Pale Moon Ebony. And when you look at that, it's actually finished in a pale gold metallic paint. That's really going to be fooling no one into thinking that it's real wood. Now this is definitely something to bear in mind if you are looking at buying these cues, because when you look at the promotional images that come up on the Rhino website, they look super slick and very, very much like they are genuine wood cues. But when you actually physically got them in front of you, they're not actually all that realistic looking at all. Yes, they are very distinctive looking and they are quite unique in the look that they have, but if you're hoping that they actually look like real wood cues, there's a chance that you will be somewhat disappointed. So that's something to definitely keep in the back of your mind. Now of course that is going to vary on the particular Rhino cue that you're going for. For example, we reviewed the Nebula 2 cue a little while ago, and that's quite a futuristic looking cue. And the model we had a gold metallic paint, and that absolutely suited the overall kind of futuristic look of that cue. However, when we're working in these kind of metallic paints and we're trying to mimic wood, no, it's not going to be 100% realistic. But of course that is purely cosmetic, and it really doesn't affect the overall quality of the cue. The quality of the print itself is excellent, it's just not particularly very realistic at mimicking the wood. So let's score our retro for quality. There is zero question that Rhino have a very fine eye for detail, and additionally must also have a high level of care and attention at the factory. And it's actually quite tricky to pick faults, because what they do so well. And remembering that Rhino is a more budget orientated brand than most, the level of quality that we're seeing here is exceptional. So providing you're not expecting a genuine real wood appearance, you'd be hard pressed to find fault. Scoring the retro full marks, 5 stars out of 5 for quality. When you start looking at carbon fiber shafted cues within this kind of price bracket, there's little question that Rhino are a standout. But of course they are not without their competitors. But many of the offerings tend to be from brands you'll never have heard of, and also with quite a range of quality standards. One of the key standouts currently for carbon fiber shafted cues is probably the Crical, which is available to buy on Amazon for around half the price of the Rhino. But it remains to be seen how good these actually are, and what corners have been cut to keep the price so super low. But we'll find out soon, because our Crical review cue is on its way. The most directly comparable option is probably Konllen, who have several carbon fiber models in the same price range as the Retro. And Konllen also have a generally decent reputation for their quality. And so there's zero question that Rhino have created a very strong and likely class-leading range with their cues. And when it comes down to the Retro series, the best value is most likely in their Wrapless model, with a big price jump of $50 to the mid-range version with the wrap, or an additional $80 if you want both the wrap and the additional printed details. But as a collection, they certainly offer very strong value for money, scoring the Retro 4.5 stars out of 5 for value. So next we need to award the Rhino Retro with an official Average Joe's rating. And to do this, we simply take the scores from across our 5 test categories, which we can then use to calculate an overall average. And the Retro clears the finish line with an Average Joe's rating of 4.2 stars, earning it our most prestigious of awards, the Average Joe's Sizzler, which is reserved exclusively for products scoring 4 stars or higher. Rhino have quickly earned themselves a reputation for being a fearsome competitor in the world of budget-orientated carbon fiber pool cues. And with products in their lineup such as the Retro, it's easy to appreciate why. Check them out today. And so that just about covers the Retro from Rhino. One question remaining, should you be buying one? Well, the simple answer to that question is yes, provided you're on the lookout for a low cost but high quality carbon fiber shafted cue at a decent price. If you are interested in buying yourself one of the Retro cues, then do remember we will be adding those Amazon links into the video description for you. And not only will we add the links for the Retro model, but for other Rhino models as well, and also the extensions and other accessories. And so if this video has been helpful for you, please help to support what we do here at Average Joe's Pool. Please be sure to help us out and click those links. So thank you for joining us here at Average Joe's Pool. It's very much appreciated. Now before you leave us, can you take 1 second out of your busy day at the very least, please be sure to hit that like button for us. It really helps us out. And whilst you're there, why not also click on the subscribe button and switch on those notifications. That way you're going to find out about all of our upcoming videos. So thank you once again for joining us, and until next time, what we do in life echoes in eternity.
I didn't think you had it in you.
I'm your huckleberry.